So, namaste from Anadi Foundation to the viewers on YouTube as well as those participating on Zoom. We're very happy to welcome Nilesh Oak ji to the session. We are just setting up the Zoom meeting and allowing participants to come in. I'll just put the spotlight on. So very happy that Nilesh ji could join us. He readily agreed when we said that the Mahabharata participants would like to have a session by him on dating the Mahabharata. And Nilesh ji is based out of US and he's an Indologist. And it's very fascinating how he combines different aspects of, genetics, archaeology, astronomy, and all those principles to come up with a lot of theories and some noticeable events. And he also uses latest technology tools to support his evidences on dating various aspects of the Itihasa, Purana. And then I also looked at his recent lecture on dating Sushruta's work and his life. So it's amazing that we could all have him here. And as we admit more participants into the Zoom. Now I open the session to Nilesh ji to start with his presentation.
Yeah. All right. So
I'll make you the host.
Okay. All right. So I think, everyone can hear me. Smriti ji, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to get into the PowerPoint presentation in a minute, and I'll start sharing it. So thank you everyone for joining for this session on the dating of Mahabharata. And what we'll do is I'll try to aim for like 40 minutes. It may go up to 50. We'll see. And then we can get into question and answers. Okay. So if I don't get to cover something during my presentation, it can always be picked up during the question and answer session. So with that, I'm going to share the PowerPoint. Okay. And let's see. So share screen. And let's see. Oh, here. Okay. All right. And share. Okay, so Smriti ji, can you see?
I can see your presentation.
Presentation, okay, excellent. All right, so let's go. So dating of the Mahabharata. All right, let me close some of these. See, waiting two people have entered. Okay, so Smriti ji, I'm seeing these messages that come like, but I think they will come. Two people have entered the waiting room for this meeting. See waiting
maybe
room.
You can accept them into the meeting for a short while, and then maybe you can just carry on, G.
Okay. So
yeah.
I'll just say admit. All right. Mute all. All right. Okay. So as a framework, let's begin with why. Like, why do we want to know about the Mahabharata dating? Now, fortunately, that's not a challenge here because everyone enthusiastically wanted to know about it. You also have the background of this Mahabharata course, you can say, that Smriti ji, both of them are leading. And so so please forgive me. I'm admitting these individuals, and of course, I'll stop after some time. All right, let me put this on the side here. The participant panel. Okay. All right. So why? So that's, the very fact you had shown this interest, that means you already know why it is. But in case that's required, let's see. Okay. Yeah, when I go, so forgive me, Smritiji, what happens when I go to admit those, then suddenly it loses my mouse contact for a minute. Okay,
Yeah. You
so
can maybe you need not admit anymore. They can participate on YouTube maybe.
YouTube, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So is there a way to stop that, just even
No,
that
they'll
panel
just be in
from,
the waiting room. They'll just be in the waiting.
okay, okay. So let's see if I close this for right now. Okay, all right. Uh, so one thing is because Mahabharata or the timing of Mahabharata is a sheet anchor for the entire Indian civilization. Everything, most of our ancient Indian narratives, and I use that word for everything that's written about India, all the Grantha Sampada you can call, just as a generic name, useful name. I call it ancient Indian narratives. So that uh, most of these will talk about Mahabharata. So that's why it provides as a sheet anchor. And then the second, to understand our civilization, and when I say our civilization, we will find actually as we go back in time, these borders of ours versus them, whatever that us and them is, actually fall off. This is Krunanto Vishwamarya, it's like civilize the whole world, the Prithvi, the Vasundhara, that really becomes one in the context. But to understand that context, we need the context of space and time. Um, so that's a why. Now, we also want to understand how we are going to find this. Now, this is very critical, and not understanding this how has caused a lot of confusion. For example, you would think this is a common sense, isn't it? Like if we want to know about something about the Mahabharata, go to Mahabharata, go approach Mahabharata. If you want to know something about Rigved, go to Rigved. If you want to know something about Ramayan, go to Ramayan. So, and I'll talk about this again when I get to scientific acumen or Vijnana Buddhi. So, if we want to know about Mahabharata, the first and primary and the most important Mahatva, Mahatva Purna, you can say, the reference for us is the Mahabharata text itself. Of course, beyond that, what you may find is that, just reading something in Mahabharata text itself is not enough, because that is a Shabdadnyan, that is a Padadnyan. And everything may not be testable, but our attempt should be to turn that into a pratyaksha or anumana, like some of the Nyaya Darshana or the darshanas that you must have heard in the previous lecture, and try to turn it into different pramanas, so we have a wholesome understanding of what is written in Mahabharata. So that is the testing of evidence to the best of our ability. Then further, there are a lot of information. There is a lot of information about Mahabharata beyond the Mahabharata text. There are many books written about Mahabharata, but also there are our Puranas, and our Purana has a lot of information about Mahabharata. Direct and indirect references to Mahabharata characters comes in other ancient Indian narratives, and they all can be useful. Okay, but never forget the hierarchy. In Vijnana Buddhi, in our darshanas, it's called a Mahatva Mapan or Taratamya. Okay, so which one is the primary document, so to say, or primary evidence? And then what happens is this: like today, I'm going to present my work, but many of you may be already familiar that the when it comes to the dating of Mahabharata, what I am going to tell you, the number is not the only number that is out there. Many people have made many attempts to determine the timing of Mahabharata, and that is all great, right? Because from every attempt, whether it is very logical or not, whether it is in the final run correct or not, we still learn a lot from each of these. Okay, if we understand the thinking, the logic of that researcher behind whatever he or she is claiming. So logical comparison and analysis of various claims is also required to decide which one is correct. I mean, why only somebody should trust my claim to be a correct one or a better one than any other claims. Okay, so that's very important. That's very scientific, for example. And Then there is the next line, which is what is in terms of the outcome. Okay, so let's see if I can minimize this chat recording this. I will stop live stream. No. All right. Okay, I can move this. So I'll move it here. Okay, so now what is the outcome? For example, at the end of this, the outcome we would like to see, if there are multiple claims for the dating of Mahabharata, is that we want to know the best claim among all available claims. And the best claim can be improved upon, that is the basis of our Sanatan Vedic Dharma philosophy. Yaskacharya, who everyone may know, or if not known, for the Niruktakar, the maker of Nirukta, essentially the etymology dictionary to understand Rigveda. He defines the Sanatana as a Sanatano Nitya Nutana, something that refreshes itself in the light of new evidence. Okay, in the light of new evidence, according to time, place, and circumstances, and so on. So we want to know the best claim among all available claims, but we should be ready to improvise it further if we get information, any additional information, additional evidence, and so on. Okay, the other aspect of that which is the outcome, is that we need to figure it out the best approximation to the truth. Okay, and we will hear that, like, for example, the ultimate Brahma, we cannot talk about it, and that's why we use the method of a neti. In the similar fashion, we may not able to know the exact thing sometime, or we may not be convinced ourselves, but still we want to know the best approximation to the truth. And in a science speak, we are talking what? More likely versus less likely, which is to say this is a certain claim appears to be more likely than other claims which are less likely. And what can be the criteria? Okay, so that's our framework. So why we want to know it? Because it's important for our civilization, the world civilization actually. And how? We start with the Mahabharata text. That's the primary evidence. We try our best to make it testable in a pratyaksha pramana fashion, pratyaksha anumana, so that we can draw inferences. We can look at additional evidence and also do the logical comparison. All right, quickly, the astra and a shastra. Okay, now what I'm referring to here is not the astra and shastra used in the war itself, but I'm saying to achieve this, what are the astra and a shastra? And that's just as a humorous metaphor I have used, but it's very meaningful. Let's go through the astra. Like you have to invoke them for a very special purpose, not like always. Whereas shastra you may always carry along with you, as a protective weapon, or against as a defense. So scientific acumen, that's one of the astra. Then logical reasoning, for example, Nyaya Darshana, but not limited to Nyaya Darshana. All Shad Darshanas talk about the Nyaya, So logical reasoning and how we draw the Anuman, how we draw inferences. Tantra Yukti, to take something from Mahabharata text and to test it in an objective fashion so that we all can look at it and we all can agree that, yes, that's how it looks to our sense perception. We have to get hold of Tantra Yukti, So how can we take something that is written in Mahabharata and make it almost visible, sense perceptible to us in our times, something that happened a long time ago. So that's also another astra. Vyapti Jnana, we need to know this because Mahabharata, in spite of the fact it's a more than 100,000 verse long, Mahabharata will write certain things and it will write in such a way, almost it will take for granted that we know some of the things it is describing. So in some cases, we may need to go beyond Mahabharata to understand what it might be referring to. Usually not, okay? Usually not. And that's the beauty of Mahabharata. So Vyapti Jnan, like a extended knowledge, background knowledge, and so on. And quickly, the Shastra, I'm not going to go through them, like explaining in detail, but Hitchens razor, Hanlon's razor, reverse Hanlon's razor, Occam's razors, and many such things. They really allow us to quickly do the logical comparison of alternate claims and get to the bottom, of what the truth looks like. Quickly, those who want to know some of the definitions. So I don't want to make you guess, keep on wondering what was that Hitchens razor. Quickly, this comes after Christopher Hitchens. What he says is, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. Okay, if somebody claims something but there is no evidence, you don't have, the onus is not on you to provide the evidence to dismiss that claim. The onus is on that person who is claiming, who is asserting something. So he says, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. Occam's razor says, we prefer simple theories to more complex ones, simple explanation to more complex ones, because their empirical content is greater and because they are better testable. It becomes much more amenable to the pramanas that we are talking, pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, shabda, and so on. Hanlon's razors quickly says, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. And the reverse Hanlon razor says, sometimes it's the stupidity, never attribute to stupidity that which is adequately explained by malice, So it can be either or. All right, let's go to the next one. So now this is my framework. And initially when I started, I did not describe any of this because I felt everyone knows it. I took it for granted, and I was wrong. I realized that actually most of the common folks do understand this. But to my surprise, and a great surprise, I realized that many in the academia or many of the Mahabharata researchers actually don't understand it. So then my second book, my third book, but also through my presentation, I started talking about this. So what we quickly have is a triangle. The three corners, one is a Vijnana Buddhi or scientific acumen. The other corner is a Tantra Yukti that I just referred to. I also refer to Vijnana Buddhi by way of saying scientific acumen. Tarka Shastra is logical reasoning. So those are kind of the three corners. In the middle, what you have is basically are the 5 elements of what we call the logic of scientific method, the logic of scientific discovery, and I'll show you the connection of its origin in our Shad Darshanas, the ancient Indian philosophy or darshana. Philosophy is a loosely translated word. So the 5 elements we have is a theory, evidence, objective testing, inference, and background knowledge. And I call this, the name is given by me, Ashtakarna Kshipti, just for fun to remember, 8 limbs or 8 aspects, if you want to call it. 5 in the middle plus 3. All right. Quickly, want to give a very high level view of Vijnana Buddhi or scientific acumen, and also the logical reasoning. So just for a logical reasoning, I'm pulling the elements from the Nyaya Darshana of Gautama. Okay, so what we have there, Gautama talks about 16 padartha, 16 elements that one must develop expertise if you want to get good at logical reasoning. Now, Nyaya is much more than a logical reasoning, but I'm using the word translation again a bit loosely. Out of these 16 elements, the first 10 are something, I just simple language, I'll say, these are good things. I mean, you want to learn all 16, but these things you want to employ. Good, including the samshay, by the way, guys, okay? Including the samshay. Whereas there are these additional 6. These are, just a simple way of my saying it, these are bad things. Now, you want to learn them so that when somebody is employing them, you can point it out, saying, hey, hold on, you are now doing jalpa, or you're doing vitanda, you are doing hitvabhas, you are doing chala, jati. In English, so those of you who are not familiar with Sanskrit, again, I'm not very good in Sanskrit myself, but jalpa is like just a wrangling, just a quarrel, the person is not interested in knowing the truth. Vitanda is somebody just finding faults in other person's claim, but he or she does not have anything of his own for that particular point, The Nyaya Darshana definition is Swapratipakša sthapana hino vitanda. Unless you have your own alternate position for that specific point that you're objecting to, you are doing vitanda, and so on. Hitvabhasa is a fallacies, okay? Chala is like a quibble, jati is futilities, and nigrastan is basically when somebody takes a position which is not acceptable per logical reasoning, whether that person understands it or not, actually that person has accepted a defeat or is been defeated. Let me quickly move to the scientific acumen. Again, their basis is our Shad Darshanas. And just want to mention few names. So for example, if you want to learn, if you have a specific aim, nishchay or prayojan, once you decide that, then based on it, you decide what needs to be separated, what needs to be extracted. So Mahabharata has so many things, but if I'm going to look at a dating, and once I put forward my hypothesis, that decides what kind of information I want to extract out of Mahabharata and what kind of information I should not pay attention to. So that's the separation. Then there is a classification, distinction I talked about, Mahatva Mapan. Then there is Anukram and so on and so forth. Notice the word Samshaya appears in both the list. It is that important. Now the Samshaya that we are referring here is a Samshaya of a Buddhi and not Samshaya of a mind. We are talking in the sense of devil's advocate. Like when you claim something, before even you present your work, you want to be a devil's advocate and see, does this make sense? What else can go wrong with it? And so on. Okay, so that's samshaya here, not the samshaya of Bhagavad Gita, samshayatma vinashyati. That is a samshaya of a mind which leads to destruction. All right, let's get into the main aspect. These are the five elements or elements of scientific method. Now I put next to those these Sanskrit words. So for example, if you again go to Nyaya Darshana, it will define the pramanas, for example, as pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, shabda, pramanani, and you'll see those words here. The word prameya is also there, agama is also there in the shabda, but that's what I'm showing you right now on the screen is essentially the fundamental, well-established foundation of even modern science. Okay, so you start with a problem, you propose a theory to solve that problem, and then you do objective testing and you draw inference, and you may use some background knowledge. All right, so with that, we are going to jump into the dating of Mahabharata quickly. 1 hour can only do so much. If this excites you at the end of this, only if it excites you, by the way, then you may consider listening to many of my YouTube videos. There are 100 plus YouTube videos of mine on different subjects, but mostly focused on dating of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Rigveda. And then these are the books, so if you are outside India, the books on the left side, those are on Amazon. If you are inside India, through books through this Subbu publication, and there is a contact number there, only do it as a text and WhatsApp, and it does not go to me, guys. Okay, it goes to somebody else. Okay, to Subbu publications. And people typically ask, what are you going to working on next? So I have listed the book, and also with some warning, don't ask me when, why, etc. When it comes out, you will know about it. All right, now we are ready to get into the Mahabharata. So Einstein said it is the theory that describes what we can observe. And as I told you, that is how the principle of our darshana is also used, the separation. So to separate, we need to know what is our theory. So on the top, I'm giving you my theory in how I came up with this dating of Mahabharata. So the statement of my theory is this, that all astronomy observations of the Mahabharata text are factual in the sense of actual, factual, visual observations of the Mahabharata times. Okay, the statement has to be universal. The statement cannot have some exception clauses. Okay, in fact, the whole idea is to do this analysis to find out what are the exceptions, what are the things that do not match for your claim. So you don't want to put these exception clauses in the statement of a theory. Then you are not doing science, you are doing a dogma. You already have something in your mind. That's why you don't like certain observations. If certain references of astronomy do not match for your claim, that's fine, but just note those down. So again, all astronomy observations of Mahabharata text are factual, actual, visual observations of Mahabharata times is my theory. Once that is decided, it becomes very easy, So now it tells me, when I'm reading Mahabharata, what I need to extract, what prithakkaran, what do I need to separate out? Well, anything that is astronomy observation. When I did that, I came across 300 plus very specific astronomy observations. Then I objectively tested them. We will not have a time today to go through any demonstration of objective testability. But if you go to my YouTube videos again, you can find videos on certain observations and how they were objectively tested and how they led to a specific time period. And then once you all do this, you have to bring it together. Okay, so that's a unification. Okay, you have to bring it back together to the final inference. And one more important point is the background knowledge or agama. Again, here that Occam's razor or law of parsimony applies, which means we can take help of as much background knowledge as we need, but we have to be careful to not take more than necessary. And we have to take only that background knowledge which is congruent with the definition of your theory. Okay, now in case you are heavily worried about where it's going to go now, and if I'm going to show you integration and differential equations, please don't worry. We are going to keep it very simple. In fact, there are no differential equations required, at least to understand this. All right, so that's the background. So quick summary: Mahabharata text is a huge text, close to 125,000 verses, 18 parvas. Out of that, I extracted these initially back in 2009 or 2010. When I did that first few readings, I extracted close to 200 references. And over time, and now, by now, I have extracted additional references. So now the list is 300 plus. And it kind of never ends. Like very recently, and I'll mention that, just very recently, like maybe less than a month, somebody else brought up a couple of references. Says, Nilesh, have you considered these references? And I had not, because I had missed those. And I'll also show you how they also match for the date that I have come up with. All right. So now, because remember, Mahabharata is a Arsha Kavya. It's a poetry, it's a history, itihasa, told in a poetry fashion. So these astronomy observations, they are there in the form of what? In the form of nimitta, in the signs. Now, some people translate that as omens, and that's perfectly fine. And I'll talk about those. But they also come in the form of a nimitta. They comes in the form of a simple descriptions. They are there in the form of upamana, like analogies, metaphors, similes, comparisons, whatnot. They are also there in the form of alankar, the poetic embellishments. So my method was, as I went on reading Mahabharata, if anything even remotely refers to astronomy, what does that mean? All the planets, the sun, moon, Rahu, Ketu, eclipses, comets, positions of any of these with respect to nakshatra, seasons, okay? I mean, tithi, nakshatra, kala, year, the month, lunar month, anything that has to do with the time aspect and astronomy aspect, I extracted it. All right. Now what we need to do, again, that scientific acumen principle, if there was another one called classification. Okay, now how do we classify? Well, that depends on your background knowledge and what problem you are trying to solve. Like a parva of Mahabharata is a certain type of classification, like a Bhishma parva and Karna parva, Drona parva. What does it tell you? It simply tells you who was the Kaurava side general during that time of the war. So that's a one type of classification. Here we are talking astronomy evidence. So the classification I did, the meaningful classification is this. And please pay attention to this, because this is the crux of it. The astronomy evidence that I find, or I found in the Mahabharata text, I could separate very beautifully into these two buckets. The first bucket is effect due to the precession. Okay, I'll not go into technicalities of it. But what that, and we can get that, we can answer that in a question answer session, if you are curious. But what this means is that the observations that are given in the Mahabharata text fall into such a category that this is not something that gets repeated every year. This is not something that gets repeated every month. These observations can only be true for a certain period of time in the past. If you go back 15,000 years ago, none of this could be true. If you go back only 3,000 years ago, none of this would be true. If you go back, say, 5,000 years ago from today, none of this would be true. What you are seeing on the screen in the blue, none of this could be true now. None of this is true now. None of these were true 1,000 years ago. None of them were true 3,000 years ago. None of them were true 5,000 years ago. None of them were true 6,000 years ago. See the beauty of it. What this allows us to do is define an approximate time where we should search for the year of Mahabharata war. But it's only going to give us the approximate time. Now, once we get there, we have to do something more. We need some additional evidence. And that comes in the form of many additional astronomy observations. I'm going to call them effects due to the near Earth phenomenon. So, for example, Tithi. The same Tithi is going to occur every month or every fortnight, if you don't distinguish between Shukla and Krishna Paksha. Same position of the sun is going to occur every year. Same lunar month, like a Chaitra, month of a Chaitra, month of a Kartika, is going to occur every year. Okay, so these are frequently occurring. Okay, and they are also very useful. They allow you to fine tune. Okay, so this is a classification, very, very critical to understand, and they tell us where exactly to nail down that specific year of the Mahabharata war. All right. Quickly, to just bring this point together, you might have heard this story. A drunkard person is looking for his lost coin, near a lamp post, and a police officer walks by and says, "What are you looking for here?" And the drunkard person says, "Well, I dropped a coin, and I'm looking for it." And the police officer asks, "Did you drop it here?" And the drunkard says, "No, no, no, I dropped it 2 blocks away, like a kilometer away." And the police officer asks, "So then why are you looking for it here?" And the drunkard says, "Well, because the light is better here." So sometimes if you are not careful in defining the area where you should search for your coin or search for the timing of Mahabharata war, you may search somewhere else. You might end up finding another coin, but it's not the coin that you dropped. So similarly, you may find another date and you may think it's the date of Mahabharata war. Well, it is a date, but it's not the date. It may not be the date of the Mahabharata war. All right. Okay. And just quickly, this is from Upanishad. No samparaya pratibhati balam pramadyantam vitta mohena mudam. I'll not go into it, but simply to make a point, to look at this evidence or to find the dating of Ramayana, it's a very exciting, but it's not a child's play. We shouldn't take it very lightly. Right now we have 100+ different claims, and in one sense it's very good, but hopefully at the end of this lecture it also encourages you to look at some alternate claims, and hopefully that gives you insight into how juvenile or how childish some of these efforts are. All right, so the third point that we mentioned in the Vijnana Buddhi is a Mahatva Mapan. I already explained it, so I'm going to go fast through this. The same classification, just another metaphor. If you are familiar with vernier caliper, the instrument that you see on the screen, if you are not, just ignore this for next 30 seconds. What that vernier caliper does, if you want to measure some, say, diameter of a ring or something, you place it there into those prongs, and there are 2 scales there. On the main scale, you take the main important reading, the major scale, approximate reading. And then on the secondary scale, on the right, top right, you try to see which line on the secondary scale matches, exactly with the line on the main scale. And then there are some mathematical calculations that you have to do. You add it to the approximate number, and it gives you the precise and accurate number. The point I want to make it is this: if you make mistake in getting this approximate reading wrong, okay, on the main scale, it does not matter how precise and accurate you try to be in taking the secondary reading. You will get a precise number, but it is going to be precise and wrong. Okay, and that's the importance of a Mahatva Mapan gradation distinction. It's also importance of the sequence. Okay, Anukram, that's another critical principle of scientific acumen. There is a sequence, there's a method to madness. There is a sequence in which you must test the observation, or there is a sequence in which you must bring those together. If you make a blunder, you are going to get a wrong answer. Okay, and this is very important, and I'm bringing it up because there are 130 these days, 130 plus different claims for the dating of Mahabharata. Okay, now we get into the actual dating part. So we have these 300 plus observations. We also separated them into observations that can allow us to know how we find the approximate area, approximate time interval for the timing of Mahabharata. And then, of course, we are going to fine tune to a specific year. So let's begin where we are today. So we are in the 21st century. That's where we are sitting here and, enjoying time together. Now, one observation from that blue list. In fact, I'm going to show you all the observations right now from the blue list, but I will also pull something from the other side, okay? Combine them. That is called Sahacharya. Sometimes you have to combine the long-term observation with a short-term observation to achieve something more. Okay, again, that's a very valid scientific principle. It's an essential scientific principle, not just valid. So we'll begin with this one observation. That's how my journey started in 1995. I was doing my master's in chemical engineering in Canada, and I had finished my thesis, and I was just waiting for my completion of master's, but I had not much work to do. Nothing to do. Everything was done. So I went to the library, was reading Mahabharata text, and I landed on this particular reference. The reference says, at the time of Mahabharata war, just the day before the Mahabharata war, Vyasa comes to Dhritarashtra and tells him, please, king, think if we can avoid this war. Okay, a huge Narasamvar is going to happen. And as a part of this discussion, Vyasadev tells Dhritarashtra many things, saying, hey, I'm not seeing good nimittas around, lots of interesting things are happening. And then among that list, he also gives a list of astronomy descriptions. One description is this, where he says, look, as you may realize, that Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha. The specific verse is Yachaisha Vishruta Rajas Trailokya Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishtha Prushtata Kruta. Now, that's when we need to know the Vyapti Jnana in a context. Those people who read Mahabharata, they know that this is referring to astronomy description. They are not thinking some man Arundhati and man Vasishtha, because they were there too, right, before. In fact, the names to the stars are given after these great human beings, Sage Vasishtha and Sage Arundhati. But here the reference is to, of course, the star. And Vyasa is saying Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha. Now, what's a big deal about it? The big deal is that astronomically, when we understand what is walking ahead and behind, which is crossing the meridian as a good way of describing it, those of you who understand astronomy or those who don't. I'll not go into the technical details of astronomy, but if we go outside at night and, just after dark, the Arundhati, the whole Saptarshi is visible in the northeast corner. And if you look at them, what you will find is, some of you might need binoculars, or all of us might use binoculars. You'll find that the Vasishtha is walking ahead of Arundhati. So as they come from the northeast, go around the North Pole and sit on the southeast. Northwest. But right now, Vasishtha is ahead. And that was the scenario if you go back 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years. In fact, until you go back as far as 6,500 years, 4508 BCE. Only if you go beyond that, further in the past, that is when there was a time period of approximately 6,000 years that you see on the screen, from 11,091 BC to 4508 BC. That is the only time Arundhati could be seen walking ahead of Vasishtha. So now we have to use our Nyaya Darshana hat, the logical reasoning hat. Vyasa is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha. We mathematically, with using Indian astronomy, modern astronomy, mathematical calculations, simulations, all kinds of things, it gives the same answer. We get a time interval more than 6,500 years ago. That is the only time when Arundhati could be seen walking ahead of Vasishtha. So you put this into a logical reasoning that tells you if these all things are true, then Mahabharat war happened definitely sometime before 4508 BCE. This is very important to understand. And of course, it also is saying that it happened sometime after 11,091 BCE. Because if you go back in history, no matter how far back you go, millions of years, still this is the only time when Arundhati could be seen walking ahead of Vasishtha. Okay. Now, so this was my work in 2011. Very recently, actually last year, another person, Siddhartha Chabra, he said, let's test Nilesh's claim. And this is, guys, very important. I don't want you to take anything, absolutely any of it, what I'm presenting blindly. I really want you to look for yourself, research yourself through my books or blogs and videos, and test for yourself. I mean, if you are not convinced, and convince yourself. So Siddhartha Chabra, a wonderful individual, he wanted to test for himself. So he looked at a recent data, like a 10-year, recent data from Hubble telescopes and more accurate measurements of astronomy, stars and their proper motions. And based on that, actually, when he repeated this exercise, he actually came up with a tighter interval. Okay, beautiful. So now it's actually from 10,248 BCE to 4636 BCE. And that's what I meant by Sanatano Nitya Nutana. Okay, so it's not like one time something is done and we should say it's all done. No, we should always try to see if we can innovate, we can improvise, and that's very dharmic. So he did that. And just for a reference point, I'm going to show you where the actual year of the Mahabharata war that I assert I came up with is that where it sits, 5561 BCE, simply more than 7,500 years ago. Or to be precise, if you add 5561 plus 2020, it will give you 7,000. What is that? 500. Am I saying it right? 81. Yeah, 7,581 years ago. Okay, but it's easy to just simply remember more than 7,000 years ago, more than 7,500 years ago, and specific year 5561 BCE. So actually what Siddhartha Chabra did is even better, right? It's even giving me a tighter interval. It's telling me the area where exactly I should look for the coin, so to say, just to use that metaphor of a drunkard man looking for a coin. Okay. Now I'm going to take you to another set of evidence from the Mahabharata text itself. If you look at the Bhishma Nirvana whole event, Bhishma fell down in the war on the 10th day. Then war continued for another 8 days, like until 18 days. So Bhishma was lying on the bed of arrows for 9 days, during the war itself. Then they did the Preta Kriya of all the fallen warriors. And as a shaucha rather, they went to bank of Ganga. And if you read Shanti Parva, it tells us that they stayed on the bank of Ganga for like a month. Okay, and I will show you that reference. So that is this reference here at the beginning of Shanti Parva. It says Masam Ekam Bahipura. That's where they stayed. Then they came back to Hastinapur. Yudhishthir was crowned as a king. He assigned the palaces, he assigned the offices, different duties to his brothers and others. And this is the time when Bhagwan Krishna tells Yudhishthir, this is the time, hey, somebody is waiting for us. We need to go see him. And who is that person? The Bhishma. So they go and see Bhishma. Now pay attention, very, very important. That is when they meet Bhishma again, after the war, after spending time on the bank of Ganga for a month and so on, coming back to Hastinapur, and now they go back to Kurukshetra. This is the time, the first day they meet Bhishma again, it is Krishna who is telling Bhishma. He says, Panchashatam Shatcha Kuru Pravira Shesham Dinanam Tava Jivitasya. Krishna tells Bhishma, now you have additional 56 days to live. Okay, so now if we combine this, and then of course you can see additional references, but the point I want to quickly say is, if you add this duration of Bhishma from the 10th day of the war until the day of Uttarayan, the winter solstice, that is when that is what he was waiting for to pass away. If you add those dates based on the astronomy and chronology evidence of Mahabharata text, it adds up to minimum of 92 days. Why minimum 92 days? Why this 92 plus X? Because we don't have clear descriptions of the exact duration from the time they came back from the bank of Ganga to the time they went to Bhishma. So it could be few days, it could be 1 day, it could be 2, 3, 4, whatever that days is. So that's why it's a X. And if these three verses don't convince you, these are all additional references, right from Bhishma Parva all the way to Ashwamedha Parva. Okay, you can see references related to this chronology. Now, what we have to do with this? In fact, this slide is very important. I refer to 100 plus other claims. No other claim, this is true for that Arundhati observation also, but no other claim can show Bhishma on the bed of arrows, falling on the 10th day, and then passing away on the day of winter solstice or a day after winter solstice, and show a duration of more than 92 days, which is demanded by Mahabharata text. Okay, so it's a very, very important reference. But let's go further. So now if I bring that Bhishma Nirvana evidence that I explained to you, and I'm not going to tell you how that was done astronomically speaking. I wrote one whole book on the Bhishma Nirvana, So sometimes the astronomy can be arcane subject, but it's very, very exciting. Anyways, the summary is that just purely on the Bhishma Nirvana, you can simply ignore Arundhati Vasishta just for a minute. Okay, you should never forget it. Purely on the Bhishma Nirvana evidence, the timing, the bracket that we get, time bracket, is from 4700 BCE to 7000 BCE, based on that 92 days, and the day of winter solstice is when he passed away, and so on and so forth. Okay, now what we are doing is we are combining that Bhishma Nirvana evidence with some additional interesting things, such as the phases and positions of moon descriptions through the 18 days of the war. And just to show you how rich is this evidence, I'm just giving you the numbers here, the 18 days of the war, and you look at those red dots and blue dots and green, and those dots essentially, that's telling you who was the general from the Kaurava side. So the first 10 days is a Bhishma, then 5 days Drona, then 2 days of Karna, and then there is a Shalya, and the last purple one is Ashwatthama, if you remember, he was made a general too, where he killed Draupadi's sons and all that through the night. Okay, so if you combine this evidence, the phases and positions of the moon, with the Bhishma Nirvana, something more interesting happens. Now we know the timing, the lunar month of the war, which from a tradition we know it's a Margashirsha, but now we have a independent evidence from the Mahabharata text itself, and something more, and it gives us another bracket here. So I'll say from 6722 BCE to 4562 BCE. Notice how they are overlapping, and I'll go a bit fast through this. Then there is something similar you can do. You can call it a fine tuning. Okay, and again you take additional references from the Mahabharata text, and it gives you another bracket. Just for a summary, if you take that the shortest bracket, essentially it's a 1600 year period from 5125 BCE to 6722 BCE. That is where we should look for the year of Mahabharata war, like that drunkard looking for a coin in the right place. Okay, and then the additional references, which I'm not going to go through, I'm just going to give a highlight of that. Essentially, we arrive at 5561 BCE. But quickly, now the question that you should have, I had, is why is this all Mahabharata researchers, majority of them, are claiming something in a totally different region, that I'm showing into this area. So sometime from like a 1000 BC to say 3500 BC, but most of them are just claiming something there. And what could be the reason? Okay, I will not go into the reason right now. We can get that into question answer session, but quickly want to show you the last bit of evidence, and then we are done. So imagine this puzzle, and because of the Zoom call, you will not able to respond to me, so I'll go fast through this. But what I have here is this. Essentially, there are 20 segments, and they form these 7 same size, equal size squares. Okay, so there are 20 segments that I used. Okay, sticks, you may say matchsticks, for example. Some of you might have played this game. This is the game I played, when I was in my elementary school. So there are these 7 squares, and suppose if I give you this as a puzzle, okay, your goal is to take any of these 3 segments out of these 20, okay, that forms these 7 squares, and meaningfully reapply them, reuse them, and turn these 7 squares into 5. Because we cannot be interactive here, I'm going to just go ahead and show you that some people might say this cannot be done, impossible. Others might say, well, uh, actually I can do it. And some of you may already know the answer. Well, this is the answer. If you remove this, this, and this, and so I'm going to show you the picture with those three segments removed. That's how it will look like. And I'm going to reapply them meaningfully now as 1, 2, and 3. So I reapplied them. And now what I have is the 7 square transform into 5 squares. And each of the segment that was there before is used meaningfully, not some thrown away because I don't like it. That's not allowed. Okay, that's true for the Mahabharata evidence too. Now, why did I tell you this story or the puzzle? Because Mahabharata evidence is puzzle. Now, some of you and most of you will know now that you have done the 10 parts and that you are a Mahabharata enthusiast. Remember the time when after about 18 years, approximately 18 years after the Mahabharata war, Vyasa sat down to write the Mahabharata text. That's what Mahabharata says. And then it took him approximately 3 years. That is also what Mahabharata says. And he needed a Siddha Hasta Lekhak, a expert writer. Okay, or in modern language, we can say typist, or a whatever you want to call it. And all of you would know that who he invited, Lord Bhagwan Ganesha came. And Vyasa said, okay, let's begin. And Bhagwan Ganesh said, there is a condition. The condition is that I will do this task, but you have to promise me that you will not make me wait. You will continue to narrate this without interruption. And then Vyasadeva put a counter condition. That's how this whole ancient narratives come to us. There is this dialogue, there is this vada, not vitanda, the vada, and that's how the information comes to us through question and answer. And the counter condition that Vyasa put forward was this, that fine, Bhagwan Ganesh, but you will not write anything. You will not put the pen to the paper until you clearly understand what I am saying. Okay, and they both agree and they go on. And if you read the Adi Parva, the first chapter, this is where this narration comes. And right from there, I have pulled one line. And then Mahabharata tells us that the Grantha was ready. And how was this Grantha? It says, Grantham Granthi Tada Chakre Munir Gudam Kutualat. This Grantha was ready. And how is it? It is full of curiosities, Kutuhalat. It is full of mysteries, Gudam. And it's full of twists, Granthi. Okay, so nothing is straightforward about this. What I mean is, it's not deliberate, but that's how a immense amount of knowledge can be captured and preserved for posterity, which is us. We are enjoying it, and therefore we have to preserve for our posterity. So just want to quickly give a highlight of this, what kind of complex and very exciting evidence is there. So here I'm going to talk about only planetary evidence. So the 5 visible planets, okay, and also sun and moon, they are also considered planet in a graha. The word is a graha, which means something that grasps, and I'll not go into those details right now. And also the nodes of the moon with the ecliptic. So Rahu and a Ketu, they are not a graha, they are mathematical points where moon crosses the orbit of the sun, as seen from the earth. And because it is as seen from the earth, all these planets, so I'm putting the earth at the center, but I want everyone to understand that earth is not the center. Everyone knows the heliocentric model and all this. We have evidence of that. Indian civilization knowing of heliocentric model, of course, in Aryabhatiya, but also in the Vishnu Puran and many other places. Surya Siddhanta indirectly talks about it. I'll not go into that again. That will be another subject. But so because we are visualizing it from the earth, and that's what they did in the Mahabharata times, think of, that's why earth at the center. Okay, but we do know that the sun is at the center and so on, but we see everything going around. So just to give you the richness, the flavor of the richness of the planetary evidence, I'm going to walk you fast through this, and then we'll get into question and answer session. So what do we have? So let's begin with Saturn, the slowest moving visible planet. Okay, many references to positions of Saturn at the time of the Mahabharata war. And this is very important. Those of you who understand how slow Saturn is, it takes 30 years to make a one full rotation around the earth. Okay, Jupiter takes 12 years to rotate around the Earth. So you cannot just pull this one planet, try to plug it somewhere else. You cannot do that. But there are multiple descriptions and they have to be understood as a sequence. So the first one here is Bhagam Nakshatra Makramya Surya Putrena Pidate. Okay, Nakshatra of the Saturn is afflicting Bhaga Nakshatra, Purva Falguni, Uttara Falguni. Okay, or it says, Mahabharata text says, Magha Swangarako Vakra. Okay, Angarak, Mars went Vakra near Magha, and Shravan Brahaspati, and near Nakshatra Shravan, Brahaspati went Vakra. Whatever that Vakra means, we'll not go into that. We won't have a time to go into that. But whatever they did, similar thing, they went Vakra, and I am saying that that was a referring to not retrograde, oblique motion. Okay, and I'll tell you how the retrograde motion, what we call Vakri in our times, is also described. The numbers, by the way, 1 through 28. So 1 through 27 are our regular nakshatras that you know. And I added 28 because there is, most of you would know, there is another Gupta Lupta nakshatra called Abhijit. Okay. And it has a position. It's very, very important. And the mention of Abhijit as a Brahma Rashi comes in the Mahabharata. It also comes in Ramayana. And of course, it is there in all astronomy text of India. Okay. It also becomes a pole star and so on, but I'll not go there. So now we have these descriptions of the three planets here. Now it goes on. Okay. For example, between that 13 and 14 is Anuradha and Jeshta. Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshayamaniva. That same Mars description continues. This is from Udyog Parva. Okay. Nunam Mahadbhayam Krishna Kuruna Samupastitam Visheshenai Varshneya Chitra Pediyate Graha. That number 11 there is a Chitra. Okay. Now, these Saturn and Jupiter are described near Vishakha, in the vicinity of Vishakha. Samvatsarasthainancha Graha Prajulito Ubho, both. Vishakhaya Samipasto Brahaspati Shaneshchara. Saturn and Jupiter are in the vicinity for a year, shining brightly near Vishakha. Okay. So those are actually retrograde motions. I'll not go into explaining today. Then on the first day of the war, we have Rohini Pidayatteva Ubhavacha Shashi Bhaskara. Shashi and Bhaskar, sun and moon, are giving Pida, afflicting Nakshatra Rohini, number 28 there. So number 1 is a Mrugashirsha, as you know there, I have written. Okay. Then there is a description of Saturn doing something to Rohini, afflicting Rohini, Pidayante. Pidayante, jo Prajapatyam cha Nakshatra Grahat Tikshna Mahadyuti Shaneshchara Pidayati Pidayan Pranikodikam, or Rohini Pidayanesho Stito Rajashaneshchara, multiple descriptions. If you go to the 17th day of the war, you have a Jupiter. I'll not say all the Sanskrit verses. The Jupiter is shown afflicting, described afflicting Nakshatra Rohini after Karna was killed, after sunset. So we have to explain that observation. On the same day, exactly that time, the Mercury, which is a Buddha, is described as going Tiryak. Okay, on the 17th day of the war. On and on, couple more. This retrograde motion of Mars is beautifully described. For example, it says Dhruvam Prajulitam Ghoram. Look at the number 10 and 11. Again, Mars there. Dhruvam, what are those nakshatra? Chitra and Swati. It says Dhruvam Prajulitam Ghoram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Chaiva Dishtita Parushagraha. It has gone retrograde there. And then after that, it says Vakranu Vakram Krutvam Cha Shravane Pavaka Prabha. Number 18 is Shravan. It came there. Brahma Rashi Samavrutta. That is Brahma Rashi. That is our Abhijit. Brahma Rashi Samavrutta Lohitango Vyavastita. Okay, there another retrograde motion of Shukra, Venus, is described. Shukram Proshtapade Purve Samaruya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Sahita Pratyudikshite. Okay, that is near Purva Bhadrapada, Uttara Bhadrapada, on and on. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of that. There are many conjunctions of multiple planets described, that these planets, you know, two warriors look like, say, Mars and Venus fighting with each other, and so on and so forth. That's how these analogies come up. Many, many more. If you go to the last day of the war, something very interesting. This last reference that I'm showing you, if you look at the top right-hand corner, full moon, that's actually moon there, not to confuse with the Mercury. The kind of look in the picture similar here. Moon and Saturn And that reference, if you have heard the names Sai Swarupa Iyer, she has written a few beautiful, wonderful books, and she is now right now doing a project on 18 days of the war. And so I said, okay, anytime if you find something new, or find something astronomy, let me know. And she brought this reference to my attention, and I had missed it. And initially I said 18th day of the war and Saturn and moon. And why would they describe Saturn and the moon? I mean, not some other steady planet like moon, something who is moving very fast. And I said, okay, maybe it doesn't match for my date. And that's possible, you know, so not everything will always match. But I went there and lo and behold, what a perfect corroboration of Saturn and moon together on the 17th and 18th days of the war. Okay. This is given as an analogy of Shalya and Yudhishthir fighting with each other on the 18th day of the war. Then there is 3 planets coming together and so on. Okay, my point is the position of the sun, position of the eclipses, and so on and so forth. I mean, we can go on and on. My point is the just the pure planetary evidence is so rich. It's like a 35 plus specific descriptions, and you have to solve this puzzle, and you don't need all 35. They just validate. But out of these, even like you take 5 or 6 after you have started with Arundhati Vasishta, Bhishma Nirvan, and so on, and then you use even 5 or 6, it's going to take you to 5561 BCE. If you use more, it's going to take you to 5561 BCE. And of course, there are very specific dates and whatnot. I'm not going to go through that. So that's about it. Now, quick summary. It is the theory that describes what can be observed. So my suggestion to you is, if you look at my claim, first, it's very important that you understand my theory. If you look at the claims of others, it's very important that you understand what is their theory is. And I'll tell you that I'm asking for last 10 years, all other Mahabharata researchers who are around, because some of them have unfortunately passed away, you know, over the last 100 years. What is the theory of their research? What is the theory behind their dating of Mahabharata war? And to this day, at least in the last 10 years, not a single Mahabharata researcher has come forward to say this is the statement of his or her theory. It's that important, guys. Okay, it is the theory that describes what can be observed. All astronomy observations of Mahabharata are factual observation is my theory. They are objectively tested and they lead you to that 5561 BCE. It gives you very specific numbers such as 16 October 5561 BCE, you know, Julian calendar competition of the first day of war, Bhishma passing away on the 31st January 5560 BCE, and you know, so on and so forth. Now, what is beautiful is this. The power of a revolutionary theory. Now, I'm calling my theory a revolutionary theory, and I want every one of you to brutally critique that and object it, is that, you know, that's what has happened. All these, not all, but majority of the other researchers, they don't agree among themselves. They have a different dates, okay? They don't agree with their own theory sometime, very a lot of conflicting evidence, but I'm just using this as a metaphor, okay? That the other many Mahabharata researchers, the claim of 5561 BCE has brought them together in spite of their internal contradictions, in spite of the contradictions between them, okay? And so I have given you a list of different claims, and these are not the only list, by the way, guys. There are many more, but I picked something that goes from what, 1000 BC to 4000 BC. Okay, and if you paid attention to what I showed you, the approximate time brackets, none of this year, just based on those approximate brackets, can be true. Forget about the planetary evidence, forget about, there is a much more additional astronomy evidence that I didn't have a time to go through. So that is the power of a revolutionary theory, okay, and that has been proven here. So I am done. Let me go back and stop sharing. So stop share. So that should give you back the control.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm done.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Nilesh ji, and it's fantastic that you know, we get a very objective, definite date of the, you know, like 16th October, and this is something exciting to us. So participants may post questions if you have. And I personally have a question. You know, when we look at archaeology evidence, you know, people talk about you know, painted grey ware and things like that, which points to about 2000 BCE.
Mhm.
How do we sort of reconcile with that date with 5000 plus?
Yes. Actually 7,000 plus, I mean, if you are
Yeah,
talking BC, then 5,000 plus
correct, correct.
BC, correct? Otherwise 7,000, because that's also what happens, because even when I say 5561 BC, many people will write me emails saying, hey, that agrees with our traditional date of 5,000 years ago, and I said, no, it doesn't. There is a gap of 2,000 years,
Correct.
2,500 years or so. So quickly to recap Smritiji's question for those who may not be aware of the painted greyware and new polished blackware pottery and so on. So for example, about 70 years ago, Professor Bibi Lal, a great archaeologist, what he did is, from an archaeology point of view, he wanted to explore if we can find out the historicity of Mahabharata. So when you talk of Mahabharata, what are some of the locations? So for connected with Mahabharata, it's the Hastinapur, it's the Mathura because of Krishna, Kurukshetra because of the war. So he looked at few locations like this, and wherever he could find the areas which can be excavated or dug out. So he did that. And what they found, for example, in this area are certain type of pottery that is consistent in, it was found in all three areas and of course many other parts of India, but definitely they found here. When they dated this pottery, it dated actually not always 2000 BC. Now we are finding older pottery that even goes to 2000 BC. But that time they found the pottery which was around 1000 BC, somewhere in that range, based on the layers. But also when they did other kind of dating afterwards, it essentially matched with what they had predicted. So Professor Lal came up with the timing of a Mahabharata, timing of that pottery as a 1000 BC. And then now let's get into the logical reasoning. So what he said is, okay, so the pottery found in Kurukshetra, Hastinapur, a place called Hastinapur near Meerut, on the bank of Ganga, and Mathura, that seems to be common, just like this is common about Mahabharata. And so those places are common. So could it be that the Mahabharata happened in 1000 BC because those three things are common? Okay. Now, just to make not a fun of his work, so that initial his work is a lot of hard work, amazing work. It is not very easy to do archaeology work. But here is we have a problem not with the evidence. We have a problem with the logical reasoning. For example, suppose say 1000 years from now, again, still in the civilizational memory, we would know that Kurukshetra, Hastinapur, and Mathura are the places related to Mahabharata. Let us say they decided to dig these places to see what they find, just as an example. And they find Apple 11 phones, in all three places. Okay, people who have discarded these modern phones. So somebody says, so these are three places related to Mahabharata. I also find Apple phones. And I know that there was a very sophisticated technology like Sanjaya seeing from a distance and whatnot, for example. And so the Mahabharata happened in 2020. See, so it is a problem of a logical reasoning. It's not a problem of the evidence, because what they found is a common pottery. Now, common pottery is found in other places also. So common pottery simply tells you that whoever lived there in 1000 BC, they definitely used pottery. They were exchanging. There was a cultural exchange between those three locations, and they were using similar pottery, whether there was a cultural exchange or not. It doesn't tell you anything about the timing of Mahabharata. Now, the way we have to use that evidence is, now we can go back to Mahabharata and text and see, is there a evidence of that kind of gray ware pottery? We might able to make some close connections. So the archaeology evidence, just quickly, another one is like, say, for example, recently in Saunali, they found a chariot. You may know that. The chariot wheel and a horse, I mean, some swords and whatnot, not horse. Now, if you still saw the articles in the newspaper immediately after that, they will say, now we know the dating of Mahabharata in 2000 BC. Why? Because they found a chariot. Now that assumes that if we find any chariot in India, it has to be from a Mahabharata. That is the assumption behind it. And it's a very logically faulty assumption. It could be from Mahabharata. It doesn't have to be from Mahabharata. We are still using the chariots and we're still using the wheels and whatnot. Did I answer that, Smriti ji? Okay, I see a couple of questions here, so I'll take that. And if you want to, please write. That's fine. If you are not asking verbally, please mute your phones because I get some noise once in a while. Okay, so here is a Subrat ji. He's saying thank you for a narration. Sorry for the ignorance. How these scripts managed to be stored 7,500 years? Has it transformed, or we have still access to original scripture? So Lord Ganesh was a human being also with a lot of elephant trunk 7,500 years ago. Okay, lot of questions there. Let me take one at a time. So how these scripts were managed to be restored? Remember, we have a Rigved, which is much older. In fact, we also call it like Anadi, like the name of the foundation, Apaurushaya. Because the knowledge of Rigveda is Apaurushaya. It is there from time immemorial. So the way Rigveda is written, right down to the accent, we shouldn't be surprised about the Mahabharata. Right inside the Mahabharata, we have descriptions, how it was restored. Many people, they consider this such as a punya activity, as a virtuous activity, that there were many individuals who remembered this by heart and they used to recite it. Others made copies and gave it to others, just like it is been asked of us to do it. And some people remembered certain portions, other people remembered the whole Mahabharata, other people made copies of it and distributed and gave it up and preserved and whatnot. So that's how it was done. Has it transformed, or we have still access to original scripture? Okay, that question we will not able to answer simply by saying yes, 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 it is transformed. That will be our shraddha. But the kind of work that I have done is a beautiful attestation of the fact that it is been preserved. The very fact there are actually, if you read Mahabharata and a critical edition of Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, so what they did, they looked at all the various manuscripts, 100 plus from all over India. And what they did is they write the particular verse at the top, but if there are any modifications, and Smriti ji and both of you can give the right name to it, I don't know, but in English I would say translation, transposition, transcription, transliteration errors. Many other errors are introduced, like some word matra goes up and down and stuff like that. So there are some errors. And what the Bhandarkar Oriental Critical Edition does is it doesn't throw those away. It tells you at the bottom what was the variation into different manuscripts. So there are some changes have taken place, changes because of errors. My point is, in spite of that, when you look at the entire Mahabharata, and just for my portion, I will say the dating aspect, when I pulled all the astronomy observations, and essentially they are taking you to that one particular date, it tells you that it has been preserved for most part, essentially 99.9999% part as is. Okay, so that's not to discount some interpolations, that's not to discount some changes might have taken place. Okay, last one. So Bhagwan Ganesh was a human being also with an elephant trunk 7,500 years ago. I don't know the answer. I'll just put simply like this. But when you read through the Mahabharata, you have to also understand, actually you should read Mahabharata to find the answer for yourself. Because in a subjective conviction, we can be convinced about certain thing. If you are somebody is asking me for objective evidence of a Ganesha with a photograph, with a elephant trunk, I have many of them, by the way, but you have to be convinced of them. Okay, so who was Bhagwan Ganesh? Many times it's actually individual. I mean, not just Ganesh. I'm talking of many other personalities. It refers to Indra and the same way. Sometimes it's metaphorical. Sometimes it has some meaning that we have not even figured it out. So I didn't have that slide with me. So if we can test something objectively, we call it science or Vijnan in a modern sense. But if something we cannot objectively test it, immediately it doesn't become unscientific or non-scientific. It becomes metaphysical or atarkya. It is beyond our comprehension. But with the improvement in knowledge, science, technology, shraddha, nishtha, and tapasya, we may able to find those secrets too in future. Okay, so we don't know all the secrets. Okay, let's go to the next one. Nina ji, do you think there is a motivation on the part of some scholars to date it to a later time, which is not based on the search for the truth? Okay, This is a great question. This is a sensitive subject. Sensitive in the sense sensitive for me to answer. Because if I say it, because I have a claim of my own, and if I accuse others that they are not after the truth, it will be seen as, me going bad mouthing them. What I would suggest is instead, the idea behind doing sessions like this is not to me making a judgment on somebody else, but encouraging you to actually do the search of your own. Okay, everyone has to do their search. The idea is that this excites you. Otherwise, what happens is today you are listening to Nilesh Oak. Okay, tomorrow, let's say you have somebody else. Now that person, he or she gives their date. Now, if you just go, okay, Nilesh was a good speaker or bad speaker, therefore I did not like his date. The other guy is a good speaker, therefore I like his date, or vice versa. That is not the way to determine this thing. So you have to, but you will find if you start reading this, other claims, or even my claim, frankly, you should read with this samshaya, not the samshaya of a mind, but samshaya of a buddhi. Is this really true? Let me check it for myself. Like that Siddhartha Chabra individual, who actually went and tried to test it. And then you find out for yourself. So I will not answer that question. But, I also have a Facebook discussion group. Smriti ji, are you part of that group? I'm not sure. There is a Nilesh Oak research discussion group.
Yes, yes, I'm part of the group.
Okay, so you can see the all kinds of back and forth discussion and hot, heated discussions that go on, and that's all very useful. I mean, not everything is useful. Some of it is definitely useful. All right, let's quickly go. How long did Bhagavad Gita last on Kurukshetra? Ilaji is asking that. Okay, again, we don't know the exact timing, but we exactly know how long is Bhagavad Gita. 700 verses. Okay, so as a simple, very layman answer would be the time that it might take to convey the content that is there in the 700 verses. Now, it's very important for you to realize that for that very reason, that remember, Mahabharata is coming to us in a Arsha Kavya, as a poetry that Vyasa wrote after 18 years. Vyasa is it's narrating what went on between Krishna and Arjun. So it is Vyasa's writing that itihasa. Okay, so it's very important for you to understand that, all these folks, when they were talking to each other, they were not talking in the Anushtup Chanda. They were not singing to each other. Okay, they were talking like you and me are talking there, but it is preserved for us in a Arsha Kavya. So whatever time that was required, and it's a Dharma Yuddha until the conch shells go off, and until there is a go, set, go, the war is not going to begin. Okay, so don't know the answer. Just on that point, Ilaji, I'll make a point. You may have a specific prayojan why you ask that question. But it's also very important that when we ask the questions, even including the previous question of elephant, so elephant was a human being with a trunk and all that. I mean, that's not an offensive question. But my point is, we have to have a sub-prayojana. There is if we answer that question, something fruitful, useful should come out of it. Because, somebody can even ask like, okay, how many people were guarding the chariot of Nakul? Well, Mahabharata may or may not have answered that question. But in what way it helps us? I mean, there has to be some purpose. If we find the answer, it should able to increase our knowledge in a meaningful way. I'm not saying that there is no purpose behind what you ask or the previous individual, but it has to be like that. And even when we have a doubt, Vachaspati Mishra uses the word, his commentary Bhamati, he says saprayojana sandigdha. It should be fruitful in its outcome, and it should be also the sandigdha, meaning the doubt that one has must have occurred as a outcome of a deep study. Otherwise, we can all come and just ask some random questions, feel happy about it, and just go on with our lives, because that question really was not meaningful. It did not help us increase our knowledge. Okay, so I was just, Ilaji, that was not directed at you. I was rather using that as an opportunity to make my point, which I always like to make. Okay. Another question, how long did, the same question got typed twice. Okay, so Smriti ji or one of you two are asking what Nilesh ji is, is critical edition of Mahabharata. Thank you. Nina ji, do we know how long it took to compose the entire text? Ah, I love those questions. I answered that question. The Mahabharata tells us, Mahabharata text itself tells us, it took 3 years for a Vyasadeva. Okay, was it done only by Vyasa? Great question. We don't know that. What Mahabharata tells us is the Vyasa wrote. We already know the partner in crime. Okay, Bhagwan Ganesh. We already know that. And it's not unusual to imagine, now this is my speculation, my conjecture, that if Vyasa would have taken help of his students, to collect the information, narration, think of how we write history in our times, for example, some Second World War, First World War, or the war of the Panipat, or specific wars that happen. The people who are fighting there, they are not some narrator there or taking a film, but those descriptions were gathered from the eyewitnesses and then they were used. So they might have done that. It remains a conjecture, it remains our guess, because not all the details are available. And it's very important, and therefore when I started how and what, more likely versus less likely, the best approximation to the truth, which means we should be comfortable that everything that we want to know about anything, in this case Mahabharata, we will never know, and that's not a problem. That's not a limitation. We can still use this knowledge in so much meaningful way, to the extent of finding the exact timing, exact date, but of course, everything, all the great wealth that is there. And my other cue was about the date of Ramayana. So I'll quickly, because that's not the topic today, I'll quickly give you this. What I just told you, all the methodology, everything same. My theory for Ramayana was all astronomy observations of Valmiki Ramayana are actual, factual, visual observations of Ramayana times. To my surprise, and hopefully to your surprise, Ramayana is much smaller than Mahabharata, 24,000 verses instead of 125,000 verses. And I found close to 600 specific astronomy observations in Ramayana. That may surprise many of you. And they all, as like a jigsaw puzzle, solving together, takes us to 12,209 BCE as the year of Rama Ravan Yuddha. And then, you use a chronology number, some other astronomy evidence to go back, 14 years, Rama's Vanavas, and then 17, 18 years to Rama's birth, and so on and so forth. For simplicity, you may remember as a 13th millennium BCE or 12,000 BCE, exact year 12,209 BCE. And I give this multiplication table to remember, So if you want to remember in a simple fashion, remember the multiplication of 7. More than 7,000 years ago, Mahabharata, more than 14,000 years ago, Ramayana, and more than 21,000 years ago, 7, 14, 21, the oldest portions of Rigveda. Meaning we have a evidence that we can match with the geology, hydrology, the whole river science, that tells us that definitely some portions of Rigveda at least are older than 21,000 years. So that's quickly answer to your Ramayana question.
There is a
Raghav
link
ji,
on YouTube which I've pasted.
say it again, Smriti ji.
There is a question on YouTube which I have pasted here.
Okay.
How did Valmiki or Vyasa collect specific information such as exact descriptions of the sky, even decades ago from the time they started with their composition?
Okay, great point. I mean, this is a great question. Whoever asked that, and again, I hope this motivates people to read Mahabharata and Ramayana. Okay, so actually Mahabharata Vyasa, if you go to Bhishma Parva, chapter 1 to 3, Vyasa is saying that I am observing, and not just a few days ago. There is enough description in the Mahabharata that tells us that Vyasadeva was observing the sky uh, for a longer time, possibly up to a year or longer than that before the war. And he continued to do that after the war. Okay, so he's saying, in fact, one of the observation I gave, samvatsara sthainancho graho prajulito ubho vishakhayo samipasto brospati shaneshcharo. He's saying that Jupiter and Saturn are in the vicinity of Vishaka for a year, which means he's observing for a year, just from that, right? And so he's saying, he tells Dhritarashtra, I am observing the sky at the dawn, I mean in the morning, in the evening, after that through the night, and he's describing. So he's making observation, his team may be making observation. Some of the war details are coming from Sanjaya. That is what Sanjay is appointed to. Actually, if you read Mahabharata, you see Sanjay is, the way it is told to us, and sometimes it's misunderstood. Sanjay is actually going to the war field many times, and he's coming back to give the information. In fact, the way war begins is, the narration that comes to us, meaning us who read the Mahabharata, is after Bhishma fell in the battle. Sanjay comes running to Dhritarashtra to tell the story, and he says, his words are, Bhishma fell down, Bhishma fell down. And that's when the whole story, Sanjay starts narrating the story, including the Bhagavad Gita. And then the war continues. And you have a descriptions of Sanjay going to the war field, coming back, and so on. So to answer that question, Vyasa was observing it, ditto for Valmiki. And we have to conjecture this, guess this, but they would have made use of all the documents that were available to them. Narrations, first person narrations. For example, in case of Valmiki, you can find this. This is very, historical point of view, very important. See, Valmiki's descriptions of the northern India, okay, near Ayodhya and Bharadwaj ashram. I'm just for a minute, I'm going into Ramayana because he asked about Ramayana, are very, very accurate. But once he starts talking about the Dandakaranya, like Rama's Vanavas and coming down, then there are some inaccuracies. Inaccuracies in the sense, some confusing narrations. And that could be because he's possibly depending on the secondary sources for that information. Okay, so that could be it. Okay, I'll go to the, is there any other questions on the YouTube, Smrtiji? Sorry, you are on the mute.
Yeah. How accurate are the softwares which are being used in recreating celestial indications given in the Mahabharata?
Okay, celestial, okay, I presume now you don't have a way of going back to that person. By celestial indication, see, that's the vague term, I presume by celestial indication, he means the clear astronomy observations, not some esoteric meaning attached to it. But let's take that as astronomy observations and how accurate these softwares are. It's a wonderful question for a couple of reasons. I'm going to take that as an opportunity to make a very important point, just an amazing point about our ancient narratives. It is this. First thing, how accurate they are. Well, they are as accurate as laws of Newton's. They are as accurate as data coming from Hubble telescopes. They are as accurate as laws of, the theory of Einstein. In simple, they are very, very accurate. Okay, that is the first point. Are there some assumptions made? Of course, there are assumptions behind everything. For all it matters, this may not be a real Zoom chat. We all could be dreaming. That's possible in principle. Okay, but we take a leap of faith, Shraddha, and say, no, we are not dreaming right now. But we might, awake from our dream and saying, no, the chat is yet to happen. So, at some point we have to have a Shraddha that this is there. But the second point, so just to answer that question, it's very accurate, amazingly accurate. Okay, yes, there are many apprehensions, people have made, given our Indian folks are giving bad names, to this software. You cannot trust the software. That's utter nonsense. Okay, the software has its limitations, and software has no problem telling what those limitations are. But as far as the type of evidence that we have in the Mahabharata, Ramayana, they are more than sufficient. That's number one. There can be some variation between softwares because of the algorithms that go behind it. Like there are thousands of algorithms, there are 4,000 plus algorithms based on this data that are there in the background. But second important point I want to make is this. If you remember, I divided the evidence into two categories. I said some evidence is due to the long-term phenomenon of the precession of equinoxes, and the other phenomenon is a near Earth phenomenon. Now, why is this important? Those two phenomena are decoupled in some ways when from a software point of view. So what happens is, and this should be a goosebump moment for everyone to listen, comprehend. If you don't, you can listen to this video again or some of my other videos. The astronomy evidence, astronomy data in the Ramayana and Mahabharata is now turning out to be a calibration standard. So sometime if you want to see if the weighing machine is working well, we will use the standard weights, that we know that is definitely 1 kilogram, and see if it reads 1 kilogram, like a calibration of a machine. The Ramayana astronomy observations, Mahabharata astronomy observations are turning out as a calibration standards to define or validate the efficacy of modern astronomy. So yes, modern astronomy helps us define this, but because of this decoupling, and it's a technical issue and I don't want to go into that, but because of this decoupling, what happens is you can match the long-term phenomenon, but you may not able to match the short-term phenomenon of the planetary positions, or you may able to match the short-term planetary positions but not able to match the long-term positions and bring it together. But Mahabharata is doing it, Ramayana is doing it. So actually, just to as a bigger answer, they're very, very accurate. They have their limitations, but the limitations do not matter as far as the dating of Ramayana and Mahabharata goes. That's true for our car, and that's true for our aeroplane. Not everything there is a perfect, but it safely takes us from destination A to B. It's the same thing. Can I go back to the Zoom questions?
Yeah, there's one question on throwing light on science and technology use, like nuclear fission or test tube babies. There's so much that is often mentioned about the Mahabharata in terms of
Right,
nuclear
right.
technology.
Yeah. So if you read again, the question is, I would encourage you to see, anytime you hear that, the curiosity should lead that person to say, really, let me go and read the Mahabharata and see it for myself, or let me go and read Ramayana and see for myself. First thing, they have to do some tapasya to figure it out where it is. Okay, because some of these claims, not all, might be just thrown by someone, what we call these days social media clickbait, clickbait news. So that's one category, just thrown something. Now parthenogenesis, that we hear the word, or the Kunti's putra, we have this so much wonderful. Why just Kunti's putra? The Kauravas are also like that, but so is a Drona, so is a Draupadi, so is a Drishtadyumna. There are so many examples of very sophisticated genetic technology that are there, but people have to read the descriptions in the original to understand what is being said, how much can be extracted. And just like I did for Arundhati Vasishta or 300 astronomy observations, anyone feeling curious, just throwing the curiosity is the most tamasic thing one can do. So, or I get, I'm sure you guys must be getting it. Why don't you guys do this and this? I get 20, 30, 50 requests, some suggestions every day. Nilesh ji, you should do this now, and they're totally clueless as to what it takes. I mean, just to work on that one verse of Arundhati Vasishta, it took me 15 years. 15 years, on working on this. So we need people like you and me and many others that who are doing it. We need 1,000 others, working on this. So yes, there is a technology. There is I can go on and on, but I'll not go there. There's just so much there in the Mahabharata, to the extent it is described, that anything that is out there in the Mahabharata, it is there in the Mahabharata itself. Okay. And Kwachit, it says something that is not in Mahabharata but outside, it will rarely might happen. Kwachit, it's a very scientific language. It doesn't say it will definitely not happen or never happen. Kwachit, hardly, rarely, very rare instance. So much is there, amazing stuff. I mean, people will come to me and ask me, and I said, oh, I read Mahabharata 30 times and I miss it. So therefore, I want these people to actually read it themselves and then do something about it. Again, that's Saprayojana and Sandigdha. I mean, one way is to, I didn't show that framework, but you are a preserver of tradition. You are a dharmic asserter, meaning you actually do the things. You are a superficial manipulator, and you are a tamasic skeptic. Those are the four categories. What we want to avoid is a tamasic skeptic or superficial manipulator. Nothing wrong. There are enough people in that bracket. If you want to be part of majority, be there. But if you want to distinguish yourself, either do something to preserve this knowledge, which is preserver of tradition. You may not scientifically test it, and that's perfectly fine. Shraddhavan dabate jnanam. Shraddha can take you a long way. Or you may even choose to become that, but do something about it. So yes, there is a lot of knowledge, not just the what you call the test tube baby or astra and shastra. There is, you just name a subject and it is there. Okay, that is my experience. You name a subject, people about the astronomy, people know about the colors, why the sky is blue, and you can find all of this, but you have to go look for it. Okay, so if I can go here, and Smriti ji, you do tell me when we need to stop. Okay,
Maybe we can take one or two questions and then.
Okay. So do you want to, can you see the chat window, or only I can see it right now?
Yeah, I am able to see the chat window.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to select one or two questions, we can do that. I see there's 17 messages below, but we can
Yeah,
let's select
there
one
is
or two.
something on the agricultural revolution itself started 12,000 years ago and
Ah,
so on.
okay, so what about it, right? That is the question. That would be the question, I presume. Okay, so the person who asked, like, hey, agriculture revolution started only 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. Let's take 12,000 years ago, which means what? 10,000 BC. And because we don't have a time, I will not go that. If it was a open discussion, I would say, what about it? Really put the question back to that person. So what? How does it matter? But I'll not do that. I know why the person is asking is because, for example, but see, that's what the person needs to ask. Also, the person needs to provide the evidence. In fact, when somebody said that agriculture is only 12,000 years, in fact, have they bothered to check the validity of that data? I can tell you they have not. They read one article somewhere and they're simply throwing that number. That is also tamasi, meaning what they're asking a question is a good one. Huh? I'm not shooting the messenger. That's not the idea. So the question they're asking is very good, but what I'm emphasizing is there is a need for anyone to go to that saprayojana sandigdha. When you see something, don't wait for Smriti ji or me or to give the answer. First, do some of your investigation. I mean, these days, Google, how difficult it is. So back to the answer. So if you think 10,000 BC, immediately the question would be, if somebody is claiming Ramayana to be 14,000 years ago, and Ramayana has a Sita and the plow and the agriculture and even Rigveda before that, how do we match it? First thing, we have to understand that evidence in the right context. Whatever evidence they found, whoever that found it and claimed 10,000 BC agriculture, all that they're saying is there is a evidence for agriculture definitely up to 10,000 BC. This is a logical reasoning, nothing to do with understanding technicalities of how the dating is done, none of this. So definitely agriculture existed 10,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago. That data is not saying that agriculture was not there before that. Okay, no, that's not my final answer. Fortunately, in this case, it so happens, but that may not be true in other cases, is that right inside India. Okay, so now Lahore Dev and all, they also go back that far. But why India? I mean, you go south to Sri Lanka, there is a very wonderful evidence of agriculture going back to, now listen to this, 16,000 BC, which is 18,000 years ago. In same Sri Lanka, we have a evidence of agriculture, at least the harvesting. That other evidence I'm going to tell you next is, I'm not sure if they have agricultural like done as a science, but harvesting, because if something is available in a lot of quantity, you don't have to even plant anything, just go and pluck the fruits and pluck the grains. But the evidence of harvesting, and a domesticated type of grains, going back to, now listen to this, 43,000 BC in Sri Lanka. 43,000. These are peer-reviewed papers. They are not new papers. They are as old as 15 to 20 years old. Okay. So agriculture is there for 50,000 years plus. And again, when I say 50,000, I'm not saying it did not exist before that. We just don't have evidence of it. You want to pick another one?
Yeah, so I think we'll close with this.
Sure.
Yes, we'll just close it with a prayer. And before that, I'd like to really thank you for your session. I'm sure it was quite eye-opening. I'll share your email ID with the Mahabharata program participants,
Okay.
and also the presentation after this.
Yeah, I will send you the presentation, and if you can circulate so that I won't get emails, send me
Yeah,
the presentation. I'll
definitely,
send it to
definitely.
you. Okay.
Yes. And then, I strongly recommend the participants to take a look at Nilesh ji's books. That will give a detailed perspective, and his videos and blogs as well.
Yes.
We close with a prayer. लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम्
Thank you very much. for inviting me, and I hope your participants enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thank you, Nilesh.
Thank you. Good night.
Really wonderful.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all for participating.
Okay, can I end the meeting?
Yes.